People are drawn to abandoned houses in a way that's hard to fully explain. And I think it's because an abandoned house is a specific kind of story. It's a story that's stopped mid-sentence. There are still dishes. There's still furniture. There's still photographs on walls and clothes in closets and books on shelves. All the accumulated material of a life or several lives just sitting there, waiting for people who are never coming back. There's something about that kind of stopping that pulls at people. The urban explorers, the photographers, the real estate agents, and the curious buyers, and the people who just slow down when they drive past. All of them feeling the same pull, the pull of a story that wants to be finished. What those people don't always account for is that the house has been alone for a long time. And things that are alone for a long time, in the dark, with all that accumulated life pressing into the walls and the floors and the ceilings, they develop habits of their own. Tonight, 3 abandoned houses, 3 people who went in and found out that abandoned doesn't mean empty. I need to start by telling you what we do and what that means in terms of how much experience we have reading abandoned buildings. Because I want you to understand that this wasn't 2 teenagers wandering into a spooky house on a dare. Bricks and I have been doing structured urban exploration for 4 years. We've documented over 60 abandoned buildings, factories, schools, hospitals, houses. We have a methodology. We assess structural safety before entry. We photograph systematically. We know the difference between a building that's been empty for months and one that's been empty for decades. We know what abandoned looks like. And we know, very specifically, when something doesn't look abandoned, the farmhouse looked abandoned until it didn't. And by the time it didn't, we were already inside. My name is Tatum. I'm 29. Bricks has been my exploration partner for 3 years. The farmhouse was in rural Tennessee, up a dirt road off a county route, visible from the road once the leaves had dropped. The kind of property that gets on explorers' radar through the community. Someone spotted it, someone shared the general location, we went. The property showed all the standard signs of long abandonment from the outside. Weathered siding, a collapsed section of porch on the east side, vegetation growing through the porch floor, windows clouded with years of grime, a rusted water pump in the side yard. We did our standard exterior assessment. Structural integrity looked manageable. The roof was partially compromised in the rear, but the front section appeared solid. No evidence of recent human activity from the outside. No fresh tire tracks. No recent debris. We went in through the front door, which had warped open in its frame. Standard entry. The interior smelled the way a long abandoned house smells. The specific combination of dust and old wood and moisture, and the absence of any human presence. A smell that takes years to develop and that you learn to recognize. We started in the front room. The first thing that caught my attention was small. On the floor of the front room, in the far corner, a sleeping bag. Not an old sleeping bag, a modern one. Bright blue, the kind that retails at an outdoor store now, not 20 years ago. Unzipped, not dirty, not molded. Recent, I pointed it out to Bricks. He photographed it without comment. We noted it as evidence of recent transient use, which happens. People shelter in abandoned buildings. We'd seen it before. Usually the evidence is older, less maintained. This sleeping bag looked like it had been used within the week. We kept moving. The kitchen was through a doorway on the north wall. The kitchen showed the standard abandonment indicators: a rusted sink, cabinets warped open, linoleum floor peeling at the edges. Properly abandoned kitchen. On the counter beside the sink, a camping stove. The canister attached to the camping stove was new, still had the plastic wrapper at the base. Beside it, a tin cup, and inside the tin cup, coffee grounds. Not dry, not old, slightly damp. The coffee grounds had been used recently, days, not weeks. Brick said very quietly, "Someone's staying here." I said, "Yes." We stood in the kitchen without moving. The question we were both working through was the same. Is this person here right now? We had 2 options. Option 1, exit immediately. The building was currently occupied by someone. that someone might or might not be dangerous, but we had no way to know. And the safest choice was to leave. Option 2, do a rapid check of the building to determine whether the occupant was present and then exit. I want to be honest that option 2 was wrong. We should have left. We did option 2 because we had convinced ourselves we could do it quickly and quietly, and because some part of both of us wanted to know before we left. That wanting to know is always a mistake. We went upstairs. The upstairs landing had 3 doors, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. The first bedroom door was open. Inside, against the far wall, a folding table. On the table, a battery-powered lantern off, a book open, face down, a bottle of water, and a phone charger connected to a portable battery pack. The battery pack's LED indicator was green, charging. Something was plugged into the charger. I looked at Bricks. He looked at me. Something was charging in this room. A phone, a tablet, something with a power demand that had been plugged in recently enough that the battery pack indicator was still green, still active. We had not heard anyone in the building. We had not seen anyone in the building, but something was plugged in. Something was charging, and the person who had plugged it in was somewhere in this building. I heard the sound from the second bedroom approximately 2 seconds after I had finished thinking about where the occupant might be. A shift of weight on flooring. The specific sound of someone adjusting their position from behind the closed second bedroom door. Not moving, not approaching, adjusting. The sound of a person who is already positioned somewhere and has shifted slightly, who has been in that room the whole time. I want to tell you what the next 30 seconds looked like, because those 30 seconds are the ones I've replayed more times than any other 30 seconds of my life. Bricks and I looked at each other. We were at the folding table, 6 feet from the closed second bedroom door. I pointed at the stairs. He nodded. We did not run. Running makes noise. Running communicates panic. Running is the wrong call when you don't know what's behind a closed door or how that door might open. We walked, quickly, silently, back to the landing, back down the stairs, back through the kitchen, back through the front room, out the front door. We walked to the car without speaking. We got in, we drove, and we were on the paved county route. Bricks said, "How long do you think they were in there?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "The whole time?" I said, "I think so." He said, "They heard us come in?" I said, "Yes." He said, "They stayed in the room?" I said, "Yes." He said, "They chose to stay in the room." We reported the location to the county sheriff's department. They found the farmhouse. They found the setup we'd described, the sleeping bag, the stove, the folding table. No person, the occupant, had left after we did. The sheriff's deputy said, "You're lucky they stayed in the room." I said, "Why lucky?" He said, "Some people who hole up in abandoned properties do so because they need a place to hide. And people who need to hide have reasons. And the reasons are not always compatible with witnesses." He said it matter-of-factly, not for effect, just the information of someone who'd seen enough versions of this to know where it goes. I said they chose to stay in the room while we were there. He said they made a decision. He said, "You're lucky the decision they made was that one." Bricks and I still explore. We have a new protocol that we've shared with the wider community before any entry, any building, any structure. 30 seconds outside every entrance, listening for interior sound. If anything is inconclusive, if there's any indication of recent occupation, you leave. You document from outside. You come back another time. And if you're inside and you find a sleeping bag that isn't old, or a stove with a new canister, or a charger with a green indicator light, you don't check the closed doors. You point at the stairs and you walk, not run, walk. And you don't stop until you're in the car. And you don't stop driving until you're on the paved road. And even then, you don't fully exhale until you've turned the corner and the farmhouse is out of sight. Even now, I don't fully exhale. I want to tell you about the furnace first, because the furnace is the thing that I can't explain away no matter how many times I've tried. Everything else in this story has a possible explanation, not a good one, not one that fully accounts for the specifics, but a possible one. The clock could have a battery I didn't find. The water pressure could be residual from the municipal line. The arrangement of objects in the kitchen could have been left by whoever was last inside. The furnace cannot be explained. The furnace was running on a schedule. In a house that has been disconnected from the gas supply for 11 years, and I'm a real estate agent, not a scientist, but I know what a furnace sounds like when it's running, and I know what a furnace needs to run, and I know that what I heard and what was present in that house at the same time are mutually exclusive, and I still can't explain it. My name is Corinne, I'm 41. My colleague Nils handles the listings in the county but was unavailable that day. He asked me to cover a walkthrough assessment on a property that had been on the estate books for several months. The property was a 1,962nd split level on the edge of a small Virginia town, middle of a quiet residential street, not remote, not rural, the kind of house that has neighbors visible from the front porch. It had been in an estate since the owner, an elderly man, had died 11 years prior. No heirs had claimed it. The estate had passed to a small trust managed by an attorney who had been trying to sell it for the past several months without success. 11 years of vacancy. The neighbors confirmed it. I spoke to the woman next door briefly when I parked. She said she hadn't seen anyone in the house since the owner died, that the yard had been minimally maintained by a landscaping service the trust paid for, but that no one had been inside to her knowledge. I had the key. I went in alone. The entry was standard for a long vacant property. Musty air, the accumulation of 11 years without circulation. Dust on horizontal surfaces in a specific settled way that takes years to develop. Furniture in the positions it had been left, covered in the specific patina of undisturbed time. The entryway looked like 11 years of nothing. The thermostat was in the hallway just off the entry. I looked at it out of habit. Agents check utilities, standard practice. The thermostat was a programmable model, digital display, the kind installed in the late 1990s. The display was on. It was showing the current time accurate to the minute by my phone and a temperature set point of 68 degrees. I looked at it for a moment, then I checked the electrical panel in the utility closet. The main breaker was off. The house had no electrical power. The thermostat's display was on with no electrical power. I stood in the hallway and thought about this. An unpowered thermostat with an active display showing accurate time. I took a photograph of the thermostat display beside my phone screen to document the time match. Then I continued the walkthrough because that's what I was there to do, and because I needed to see the whole property before I could assess it. The kitchen had the dust and the stillness of 11 years, but the arrangement of objects on the counter was specific in a way that long vacant kitchens aren't usually specific. A coffee maker, positioned beside the coffee grinder, beside the canister of coffee. The sequence of morning coffee preparation laid out in the order you'd use them. Not left mid-task. The canister was closed. The grinder was clean. The coffee maker was empty, arranged, ready. Like someone had set up for tomorrow morning's coffee and then hadn't come back for 11 years. I noted it, I photographed it, the sink, I turned the tap, standard check, assessing water supply. Water ran, not a trickle, full pressure. I checked the utility records on my phone. The trust filing showed water service had been disconnected 8 years prior, 2 years after the owner's death. I turned the tap again, full pressure. I went to the basement. The basement contained the mechanical systems. The water heater disconnected by the utility company, a sticker on the unit confirming disconnection 8 years ago. The furnace was a gas-fired forced air unit installed in 1994 by a company whose sticker was still on the housing. Rated for the square footage of the house, the furnace was warm. I put my hand on the housing. Warm. The specific warmth of a unit that has recently completed a heating cycle. I looked at the gas line connection, a tag, plastic, attached to the shutoff valve. Gas service disconnected the 14th of October 2016. 8 years ago, the furnace had no gas supply. The furnace housing was warm. I stood in the basement of an 11-year vacant house in front of a furnace with no gas supply that had recently completed a heating cycle. And the thermostat upstairs was displaying accurate time with no electrical power, and the water was running on a disconnected line at full pressure. I went back upstairs, I stood in the kitchen, and I listened. The house was quiet in the way a house is quiet between events. Not the silence of nothing happening, the silence between one thing finishing and another starting. At 10:47 a.m., by my phone, the furnace kicked on. I heard it clearly from the kitchen, the ignition, the blower, the specific sound of a forced air heating system beginning a cycle from a furnace with a disconnected gas line, running on a schedule, while I was standing in the kitchen of a house that had been empty for 11 years. I left. I'm going to be direct about that. I gathered my bag and my documentation, and I left. I wrote the assessment report from my car. I told Nils I wouldn't be doing any further walkthroughs on that property. He asked why. I told him what I'd found. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The furnace was on?" I said it completed a cycle while I was in the kitchen and kicked on again at 10:47. He said, "The gas is disconnected." I said, "Since 2016. He said, "So?" I said, "So I don't know what it's running on." He said, "What does the thermostat say it's set to?" I said, 68 degrees. He said, "That's a comfortable temperature." I said, "Yes." He said, "Someone set it to a comfortable temperature." He said it quietly, not accusatorially, just observationally. Someone set it to a comfortable temperature 8 years ago when the gas was disconnected, or 11 years ago when the owner died, or at some point between those two dates, or after both of them. Someone set the thermostat to 68 degrees, and the house has been maintaining 68 degrees ever since, with no gas, with no electricity, on a schedule, because a house that has been alone for 11 years has developed its own way of staying warm. Hey, right here before Corinne finishes this. If tonight's content is what you're here for, hit subscribe right now. Every week, more of this. The houses that don't stay empty, the things that don't stop when the people leave. Drop a comment. Tell me what you would have done when the furnace kicked on while you were standing in the kitchen. Would you have stayed to finish the assessment? Because story 3 is about someone who moved in, someone who bought an abandoned house and lived in it for 3 months before they looked at their own footage and found out what had been in the house with them the whole time. I want to be honest about what I was doing with the footage, because the reason I was reviewing it is important. It wasn't idle curiosity. It was because I was putting together a time-lapse compilation for a home renovation project diary that my wife Sloan had suggested I make. Her idea was that we'd have a record of the transformation, the before and the full process, something we could share eventually when the house was done. So I sat down on a Sunday afternoon and I started going through 3 months of video clips. I was about 40 minutes in when I stopped. I went back, I watched the clip again, then I opened the clip before it, then the clip before that. I sat at my laptop until 2 a.m. And when Sloan came downstairs and found me there, she said immediately, "What happened?" Because my face was the face of someone who had been sitting with something for a long time. I turned the laptop toward her. She watched for about 30 seconds. Then she said, "What is that?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "How many clips?" I said, "Every clip from the back bedroom, every one." My name is Rafferty. I'm 38. Sloan is my wife. We bought the house in February. A 1,940 seconds Craftsman that had been vacant for 7 years in a neighborhood where properties like it were coming back into use after a period of neglect. Good bones, significant surface work needed, the kind of project we'd been wanting for years. I'm a contractor by trade. The renovation work was something I could manage myself in the evenings and weekends. We planned to be in it for a year before the major work was done. We moved in during the renovation, which meant living in an active construction site, which we'd done before and knew how to manage. I set up cameras throughout the house in the first week. Not security cameras, documentation cameras. Small action cameras, 3 of them, in the 3 main work areas: the kitchen, the living room, and the back bedroom. The back bedroom was the project I was least looking forward to. A room that had sustained significant water damage from a roof issue that had gone unaddressed for years. The walls needed to come out and be rebuilt. the floor needed to be replaced. It was the most intensive single room in the renovation. I started filming in the back bedroom in week 2. In 3 months, I had accumulated approximately 60 hours of footage from the back bedroom. Most of it was standard construction documentation, me working, the process of demolition and rebuild captured for reference. When I started reviewing it on that Sunday afternoon, I was looking for the good clips, the before and after markers, the moments of visible progress. I was looking at the work. I wasn't looking at the background. The first time I noticed it, I wasn't sure what I was seeing. In a clip from week 4, I was working on the east wall, pulling damaged plaster, and in the background, in the corner of the room behind me, reflected partially in the window glass, a shape, a person-shaped mass standing in the far corner. Not me. I was clearly visible in the foreground working on the wall. Behind me, in the far corner of the room, something standing. I stopped the clip. I told myself it was a shadow, a trick of the work lights I was using, a combination of camera angle and the specific light sources creating a false impression. I moved to the next clip. Week 5, I was working on the floor joists, bent over the subfloor, and in the background, over my shoulder, in the same corner, the same shape, standing, facing the camera. I went back to week 2. The first clip from the back bedroom, I forwarded to approximately the 15-minute mark, deep enough into the clip that I'd been in the room long enough for any natural shadow patterns to have established. The corner, the shape, week 2. It had been there from the beginning, from the first time I worked in that room, for 3 months. Standing in the corner of the back bedroom while I worked 6 feet away. In every clip from the back bedroom, the same corner, the same posture, watching. I watched all 60 hours. Or rather, I fast-forwarded through all 60 hours, looking specifically at the far corner of the back bedroom in every clip. It was there in every single one. But it wasn't simply standing. That's what I missed when I first saw it. I described it to myself as standing because that was the simplest description. But reviewing all 60 hours in sequence, what it was doing was more specific than standing. It was watching me work. And in a specific subset of clips, in the clips where I was on my hands and knees, working on the floor, where my body was low and my focus was down, it moved closer, not dramatically, not quickly. An inch or two, a shift in its position toward me over the course of the clip. Only when I was low and focused away. Only when my attention was fully on the work, as if it knew when I wasn't going to look up. I showed Sloan everything. We sat together and we went through the 60 hours or the relevant sections, the corner clips, the closer approach clips, the 3 months of renovation documentation that had a figure in the background of every frame from the back bedroom. She said very little while we watched. When we were done, she said, "It's always that corner." I said, "Yes." She said, "What's in that corner?" I said, "Nothing." I've been working in that room for 3 months. There's nothing in that corner. She said, "There was something there before we bought the house." I said, "I don't know." She said, "What do we do?" I finished the back bedroom renovation. I want to be clear about that. We didn't sell the house. We didn't stop the project. I finished the room, but I set the documentation camera to an angle that didn't include the far corner. And I moved the work lights so the corner was always fully lit, no shadow pocket, full brightness in every inch of that room while I was in it. And I checked the corner every time I entered that room before I started work. I looked at the corner directly. It was always empty. The camera had always been running, and the corner had always appeared empty when I was looking at it directly. It only appeared occupied in the footage, only when I wasn't watching, only when my attention was on the work, only when I wasn't looking at the corner. The room is finished now. It's been the guest room for 8 months. Sloan's sister stayed in it for a week in April. She said it was comfortable. She said she slept well. She said she felt like the room had a presence, but a gentle one, the way some rooms feel inhabited even when they're empty. I said a lot of old houses are like that. I did not show her the footage. Some things, when they've coexisted peacefully with you for 3 months without doing anything but watch, you don't need to explain to the people who sleep in their room. You just make sure the light in the corner works, and you check it every time you walk in. before you look away. 3 abandoned houses. A farmhouse in Tennessee that had a current occupant who stayed in a closed room while 2 explorers moved through the building who had been watching them the whole time and who had chosen that specific day to let them leave. An 11-year vacant split level that was maintaining a set temperature of 68 degrees on a schedule, running a furnace with no gas supply, keeping accurate time on a thermostat with no power, and running water through pipes disconnected 8 years ago. And a 1,940 seconds craftsman that allowed its new owners to renovate and move in and document 60 hours of work in one specific room while something in the corner of that room watched the whole time, moving closer only when the narrator's attention was on the floor. Here's the thing about abandoned houses that all 3 of these stories illuminate. Nothing is ever fully abandoned. People think that when the last person leaves a house, when the key turns in the lock for the final time and the car backs out of the driveway, the house becomes nothing, a container without contents. But a house that has had people in it for decades, for generations, has absorbed all of that. Every argument, every meal, every 3 a.m. sleepless hour, every morning routine, all of it pressed into the plaster and the floorboards and the walls. And when the people leave, the house keeps what they left, and sometimes it keeps a schedule, and sometimes something moves into the space that people left, and sometimes something was already in the corner before you ever arrived, before you brought your renovation cameras, before the real estate agent came with her key, long before the urban explorers walked through the front door, waiting in the corner in the 68-degree warmth, in the room with the closed door, doing what it does, with or without witnesses. Good night,